So with the announcement that we're going to be getting like a similar campaign for Lostbelt 2, similarly to what we got for Lostbelt 1 in this whole like Road to Lostbelt 7 campaign, my gears in my head got turning and I was like, man, what buffs could we see for some of these servants? So over here I've pulled up Sigurd, Brynhilder, Napoleon, Sitt, and even the Valkyries over here, because I wanted to actually look at like what they could possibly get to their kits to make them a little bit better. So in this video, we're going to analyze their skills, kind of talk about what maybe they could get if one of them is going to be receiving the buff. I don't have Scotty here because they just buffed Scotty. I think it's a little odd if they do give her a buff. And Scotty's a bit broken anyway, that it's kind of hard to touch her skills without actually just making her absolutely ridiculous. I mean, maybe they could give her like a targetable special damage mod on the battery skill. Like she gives them the 50% battery and then they get like 50% damage against, I don't even know, like beast, divine, something along those lines. Something like that. Maybe she gives them 30% NP gain on the battery skill. That would actually be stupid broken for quick servants. I would want to say like necessary, because then at that point it puts Scotty on the same level as someone like Castoria. So if anybody was wondering what I think Scotty could possibly get, that'd be absolutely broken. Something like that would be really, really good. But before we get into the video, if you enjoy daily FGO content, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. I stream every day over on my Twitch, or every weekday at least. So feel free to come out there and peep the streams, all that good stuff. With all that being said, excuse me, let's start off with our boy Siegfried, the King of Warriors over here. So Siegfried has the basis for a very strong hit. As many people know, his NP down here does an extreme amount of damage. Even without this special damage mod against dragons, Sigurd hits really, really hard. Now, the only problem is that Sigurd's kind of a one-pump jump, but to kind of fix that and subsidize that, they've given him this extremely powerful critical damage buff here. However, it's only lasting for 3 attacks for 3 turns, so you can really burn through this very fast. But you can see the style of gameplay they're going for with like decent hits on his quick card, this ability on his 3rd skill to gas up. You can target anybody, but you're probably going to give it to Sigurd himself, right? To massively gas up his own star gen, which is also good for his NP because he has 7 hits, but unfortunately it's not AoE, so doesn't really do the Emiya, Iskandar, or Raiko thing where they have buster NPs that drop an extreme amount of stars. Can't really do that. But he has this insane good shell of a kit right now where he's got massive crit damage, a strong NP, a pretty good special damage mod. Dragon's not the best, but it's still very strong. I mean, he has the guts on his 2nd skill plus the debuff immunity here. And, you know, he has his buster buff, which every buster servant could use, but he's kind of lacking on something to kind of tie it all together. Like, give him something that kind of meshes everything into one skill. Unfortunately, I think the most likely thing that he's going to get is they'll probably buff skill 2, and like how this is 3 attacks for 3 turns, they'll probably do that for the buster buff as well. Maybe extend the guts, or maybe add, I don't know, like a damage cut, or just like a random attack buff or something, just to kind of give him even more damage. Honestly hoping that this, if they do buff it, because the way that the crit damage is buffed is, I think, is very telling of how they'll do the buster buff in the future. At the very least, maybe throw in like a charisma, right? Like a 20% attack buff, because then at that point, he has the buster buff multiplying into his attack buff, which gives him a lot more damage than just, you know, a 20% attack buff, because different buff types have to multiply into each other. And then it at least gives him some damage buff that will be up whenever his buster buff goes down after that turn, or after the, you know, 1 turn if you just do like a buster brave chain or something, right? Could still be very good for stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for Sigurd, but I'm not gonna lie, I think Sigurd needs a bit more maintenance. They really do gotta fix up this servant. He's kind of inflicted, as you guys can see, with just a lot of these buffs that he can burn through very quickly. Like, this can all be used in like, this can be used in 1 to 2 turns depending on what you're doing. If you have like a full crit brave chain, it'll be a very strong chain, but you burn that in a turn. This goes away in a turn, and these go away in a turn. The only thing that really stays is his guts for 3 turns. So I would kind of like to see a little buffs there. And also, if they're going to buff this, maybe slap that up to 3k HP or something, just to make him a little bit more tankier in a lot of the boss fights, which is where you want to use him anyway. So then we look at Brynhilder. Brynhilder's in a much better position because they've already buffed like her 3rd and 2nd skill, and they're both pretty strong. Like, this is a fairly good skill right here because you can give anybody star weight and 40% crit damage for 3 turns, which is a little off the norm, because the norm is usually like 50% crit damage for 3 turns, but the fact that she can give it to anybody plus just giga large star weight to basically guarantee their critting is very nice. And the 3k heal, just a nice little cherry on top. They made her a little more consistent by giving her this NP battery right here. And then even though these are only 1-turn buffs, the fact that it's a buster buff and an NP damage buff actually means it's very similar to someone like Karna or Arjuna with their mana burst, because those multiply into each other to give her a lot more damage. Really, the only thing I think they really need to do with someone like Brynhilder is I would just like to see her get like these for 3 turns. Like, that's pretty much all I really want to see her get. Maybe bump this up to 30%, leave that at 15%, make them both 3 turns, and she's absolutely fine. I think she's going to be absolutely pretty nutty at that point, because then she gets really consistent. And I don't know. I think that's like the best thing you can do, because her NP is fine, because this is a really good damage mod. It's very similar to something like Gil's like hitting all servants. It's not quite as large, I don't believe, but it's still just a massive amount of servants. Just a bunch of like hodgepodge of random beloved servants that she could just smack in the face. This is very nice to give her a little bit more team utility. It especially pairs very well with the 3rd skill, because this means like, oh, now the entire party can drop stars fairly well, and then you can just target whoever you want to be a crit damage machine, and they'll be a machine for the next 3 turns. So I think it's very, very nice, especially because, keep in mind, 3 turns, so it stacks. You fire 2 NPs, everybody is going absolutely nuts, because then they have a 100% crit star damage buff, or not damage buff, but drop rate, which is the same as like cast skill. Gets pretty insane pretty quickly. So realistically, just do that to the 1st skill, and I think Brynhilder, I pretty much have no complaints with. I think I'm absolutely fine with whatever they do. So hopefully they do that for her 1st skill. I would really, really love to see that. Then move over to Napoleon. Napoleon's kind of hard because Napoleon's already really good. Like, this is already really strong. Like, this is a good charisma because it allows him to burst really hard for 1 turn. This is really strong because he has like a pretty decent hit NP that, combined with this effect right here, allows him to drop quite a fair bit of stars. But it's also really good that it gives it to the entire party as well. So if you like do his NP plus like, I don't know, your other buster servant that maybe has like decent hit quick cards, they can drop just a gafoogle amount of stars. Then the Pierce invincibility here on skill 3 plus the Pierce defense that's built into his NP pretty much means nobody runs away from Napoleon. He just blasts everybody. He gave him a 30% battery. He refunds stars here, has the drop rate here, and then he has 20 stars every time he pops his NP with a really good damage mod against Divines. It just makes Napoleon a really, really strong servant. Like, it's really hard to really say anything negative about him. I mean, he doesn't have survivability, I guess, but Napoleon's method of survivability is very similar to someone like Arjuna Altars. He is pretty much just obliterating the enemy, and that's how he's living. So I don't know, like, I really don't want to see them buff Napoleon, because out of the group, I'm really thinking he's like the one that needs it the least. Like, I don't really think he needs much. And even if they do, I mean, you make that 3 turns, or you make these 3 turns, sheesh, he is crazy. This doesn't need to be buffed. I mean, we can make that a 50% battery, and then he's broken. Like, then we gotta have the discussion of Napoleon versus Tesla at that point, because then they're both just disgusting. But yeah, honestly, don't think Napoleon's gonna get it, because he doesn't quite need it right now. Alright, then there's Sitt, the servant that nobody can actually agree on. Okay, let's break this one down. This is a good skill, right? The fact that she has a very good form of survivability and the invincibility for 1 turn is strong. Giving the entire party 3 attacks of damage cut is very strong as well, especially when you pair it with other defensive skills like Waver's buff or Mash's buff, Reigns, anybody like that. Even someone like Bedivere, if you, for whatever reason, you're running them together, right? It's very good for stuff like that. This is very strong, right? Like, this is just a very good skill for art servants to have, because art servants like to stay on like a nice, consistent 3-turn loop of being able to do things and loop their NP. Makes it very nice that she at least has the 30% for 3 turns, right? That's very good for her consistency. This is very good for boss fights, because it means she can dodge like a stun, a charm, or something once pretty much every 5 turns, right? Which is very, very nice. And then she has this 30% battery plus the append skill gives her a fake 50% battery, meaning she's compatible with any 50% starting charge CEs. Not that that really matters, because double Castoria, if you're using that, pretty much just makes anybody loop with whatever. So you should be fine in any boss fight to just slap any CE onto Sitt over here. The only thing that I think is annoying is this, right? This is where I think a lot of people kind of get annoyed with Sitt tonight. Not only that, but also this right here, right? That reduces dragon enemy NP by 1. I think that also annoys people. So I'm really thinking we either buff up, say, skill 1 or 2. Just like, it doesn't really matter which one. You can just give it like 20% buff success rate for the next 3 turns to the entire party. I think it's better on this one because then you can give it an excuse to give it to the entire party. That could be really good. It guarantees her attack buff, which means she'll now have the guaranteed 20% attack multiplying into the arts buff over here to give her some damage. It gives her crit stars every single turn, which art servants do tend to struggle in getting stars because their arts cards are not designed to do that. So when you have an art servant, they can provide their own stars for themselves. It's very good. Or we just buff up her NP. We buff up her NP to give it higher damage scaling, right? Which is very strong to just make her hit harder. We just make this, she just reduces any enemy's NP by 1, and then further reduces dragon enemy NP by another 1. So that way, it's like you're fighting a dragon, she double lowers, but she still does it normally, right? We can still do that. And then maybe we make this proc first as well, like just to give her extra damage. Just make that proc first, and I think she definitely becomes a lot better. I think this is a bit more important, though, to do, because people get really annoyed by these percentage-based buffs, so let's just fix that up real quick. And then finally, we have the Valkyries. Like I said in the last video, this is really hard to do because they're competing with Parvati, and Parvati is really, really hard to compete with, right? It's not even that they're bad, right? Because they're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. They just have stiff competition. I mean, they got high natural NP games you want to see in a looper. This is insanely good just for all the reasons I just talked about Brynhilder's first skill being good. This is good because you have for 3 turns 30% quick, 20% NP gauge. Like, this is literally Karna and Arjuna's buff, right? But it's for 3 turns, right? It's absolutely insane. Like, it gives them really good consistent damage. The fact that they have this very strong survivability skill, where like everything that I just said, like the damage cut that Sitt and I gives to the entire party, all of that is stronger here at 1000. They still have the debuff immunity to dodge if you're bringing them to boss fights, and the evasion for 1 attack. Now, evasion for 1 attack can be kind of annoying because you have characters like Okita Alter that I know a lot of people really hated, but it's kind of like managing your 1 attack. But as long as you're popping it around the time that you need to dodge an NP, you should be absolutely fine. And then there's also the benefit of, like, I don't know, let's say you're fighting a single target opponent for whatever reason. You're fighting Moriarty or something, right? Let's just say that. You're fighting him. Not that it really matters, but just, he didn't pop his ignore invincibilities. Just ignore all that, all right? Fighting some single target archer, right? And they're going to fire this on you. They don't attack Valkyrie at all. You still have that evasion for next turn. Like, so it does have some actual benefits to it. Maybe you could slap these to be both, like, 2 times. I don't really know, but that's not really necessary for them. And then this is very good for longevity. The only problem is that, like, as a looping servant, they kind of want an immediate battery. But then again, if you're using them with double Scotty, you ideally want to have a maximum broken scope or something, right? To, you know, start off the farm. That's the ideal way to do Scotty farming. So this is just kind of like icing on the cake there at that point. So realistically, maybe they buff this skill right here and they just give her like a 20 to 30% battery. That's also immediate. So then they have the refund every turn, 20 to 30%, dust their hands off, and they're absolutely fine. They can maybe also buff their NP gain by 20% for 3 turns or something along those lines. They do something like that, they just become an absolute machine. And then at that point, they actually might be better than Parvati. If you just give them the immediate 20 to 30% battery and then 20 to 30% NP gain, because they already do more damage than Parvati, which let me actually confirm that right now. I believe they actually do more damage than Parvati, it's just that it's not enough of really a gap to make the most of a difference. So let me just pull them up right here. Let me make sure I'm not absolutely just capping. No, they don't do more damage with oh yeah, because Parvati got an NP damage. But yeah, okay. Yeah, they definitely need something. You give them that, they can at least loop. But man, maybe they actually need a buff to their NP, actually. I forgot it was that bad. I forgot, like, because it used to be the dynamic because Parvati got a buff, I think, that made her do more damage or something along those lines. It wasn't this bad, if I remember correctly. Or maybe I'm just getting old and I'm just forgetting, and I've just been playing FGO for 6 years and I can't juggle all the information. But that would be a nice buff that I mentioned, but I forget the damage buff is that bad. Because this is good, but it's just their natural attack is really low, right? So, like, you can give them strong buffs like this, but if their natural attack is low, they really can't do much outside of that. Yeah, let's actually just buff the NP straight up. Give it the higher damage scaling. I don't even know, give them like a special damage mod, have them proc a attack buff whenever they fire their NP, because we don't want it to be a quick or an NP damage buff, right? We don't want one of these. We already have these buff types. We want to give them a third buff type to multiply into each other. So let's go with like a 20% attack buff for 3 turns, or let's go with like a special damage mod against whatever they want to do, right? Against humanity or something, or anti-human threats, right? Because they're Valkyries, they're supposed to be allies of humanity. We do that, we call it a day. All right, we call it a day, we move on. Okay. Yeah, that was the one that I was like, oh, I kind of forgot that their damage was so low. Like, I don't know why I had them backwards, but yeah, with all that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What buffs do you want to see these Lostbelt 2 servants get, and who are you hoping could actually get it? I'm really hoping and praying that they do more than one this time, because last time they only did Ivan. It was a little disappointing, but hoping they'll do numerous this time. I'm really crossing my fingers for that Brynhilder one. Like, if they make Brynhilder skill basically this skill but Buster, oh my goodness, Brynhilder is going to be very broken. She's going to be very, very good. So yeah, with all that being said, boys, let me know what you guys think. Comment all of that stuff in the comments down below. Like and subscribe. Come to the Twitch streams. With all that being said, peace. I'm out.